Hello, welcome to John's Author Diary for the weekend in November 18th, 2018. I've been working on the second draft of the Hierophant, and so I'm about half the way through that. I was finding it really difficult to get the words done this week just because, I don't know, maybe it's the time of year because I get seasonal affective disorder, or it might be that I'm just starting to feel a little bit burnt out with editing, because when I'm doing these novellas, I'll be drafting for a few days and then it's basically 3-4 weeks of editing. So what I decided to do this week to make myself continue being productive was to work in the afternoons on Cleric of the Wasteland. So I've added a few more chapters to that, so that is coming along nicely. And I'm just going to keep doing that, I think, going forward, because I would like to get this last book out. I don't want it hanging over me. I feel like I owe it to the readers to get it done, so I'm going to do it in parallel when I'm editing and just keep plodding away at the story. If I'm adding 1,000 or 2,000 words to it in an afternoon when I'm writing, then I should be able to get a first draft done maybe by the end of January. As well as that, I've also been putting the final touches to a story for the next collection of otaku stories. So this is one called Perfectly Blue and Perfectly Square, and it's a story about space cats, and it's really stupid, the story, to be honest. It's comedic, it's funny. I hope it's funny. It's funny to me, and I think that's what's important. So I think we'll be putting those stories together over the next week or two and getting those out as soon as possible. Now, with the podcasts, we've just recorded our last episode of the year for Otaku on Writing. So this is basically just a follow-up to talk about our short stories inspired by Dominion Tamp Police. Now, in one way, this is just to give me a break from podcasting and editing, because obviously I'm running Otaku on Writing and Stop Booking Around and this podcast. So this will be the only podcast that I'll continue doing throughout December. So I've been getting some really good feedback on the interviews I've been doing on Stop Booking Around. Had a really fun interview come out on Tuesday with author RJ Barker. This is where we talked about writing fight scenes and violence, and that was a lot of fun to do. And then earlier this week I interviewed Claire Sager about writing long books. So I realised that her debut novel is longer than my entire Wasteland series. So we had a conversation about writing long books and researching historical fantasy, and we went all over the place with the conversation, but I think it was a really good episode. I also interviewed an author called Emma Geen, who has actually done a PhD in creative writing. So I met her at a writing workshop in 2016, which was about writing non-humans. So I decided to talk to her about that, and that was a fascinating discussion. I think there's a lot in there for writers. And so again, I'm going to have a break after these 2 episodes. I'm going to try and catch up with Russ, but life is getting in the way at the moment for him. And I have said to him, just focus on your family, don't worry about a podcast. It's just a podcast. So December's going to be a quiet month. I'll continue doing my author diaries. I won't be doing any over Christmas, but there'll be something on the podcast feed. I've got a few ideas for something I could do. On the recommendation of a couple of author friends, namely Cillian Carter and Claire Sager, I've started to do what's called bullet journaling. Now, this is basically a way of organising things like to-do lists and tracking progress on projects and things like that. And I'm thinking, because I do seem to be spinning quite a few plates at the moment, it'd be good to have a way of getting everything together in a focused way rather than having it all in my head. So I've really enjoyed setting that up. I bought myself a jumbo notepad. I've been setting up some of the pages for that, started ticking off some tasks. Now, what I've done with this, which is something I learned from the book The One Thing, is not only do I need to focus on my business, focus on my writing, but also I need to make a conscious effort to focus on family and friends. So I'm actually putting in things like spending quality time with my wife as a task, because if it's there, I'll tick it off and it'll get done. I'm also going to use the book to start collating my ideas about story, structure and writing, and add interesting things that I find, little anecdotes I overhear or interesting ideas. So of course, with anything like this, I can see how bullet journaling can become all-encompassing, and so it's one of these things that I'll have to do at arm's length and make sure that they don't take up too much of my time. I think it's when something starts taking time away from the primary tasks, that's a bad thing. But I think having little reminders of marketing tasks and things like that that I need to do will be useful for me. In terms of reading, I finished off that series of Great Courses lectures on covert operations and espionage. Really fascinating stuff. It went from prehistory right up until the modern day, and I think I got a lot of ideas from that. Luckily, I came out of it with no desires to write a spy novel, which is what my worry was, so that's good. I've also started reading a novel called The Element of Fire by Martha Wells. Now, this is part of my ongoing thing to read some fantasy featuring assassins. So if you've got any recommendations, please let me know on Twitter. It's at JLCronshaw. The same goes for any books about military training. So I've got a few in mind, but if you know of any good fantasy ones, do let me know. So I've had no questions this week, but if you want to send me a question, it's john@johncronshaw.com. I'm now on Instagram, so you can follow me there. It's John Cronshaw Author. I'm basically just posting a lot of pictures from round and about, things that inspire me for fantasy world building. This tends to be just cool landscapes or cool buildings or interesting objects I spot in museums. So until next time, cheerio.